Today's video is going to be a bit longer than usual. It's going to be going through a lot of the questions on the review, and it's going to be a longer format. If you already know how to do some of these questions and you need to skip around, um, feel free to skip around the video. I will have timestamps in the description of questions one, two, three, and so on. So, with further to do, let's move on straight to question one. If you need more explanation about how any of these things are formed, please watch my detailed explanation videos on these subjects. That way you can get a more detailed explanation and you're able to follow along a little bit better. But since this is a review video, I will be going a little bit quickly. So first up, find the midpoint of 2 points, 4, 3, and mid 2, 8. Well, finding the midpoint is the same as taking the average of the 2 points together. So what you want to do is you want to add up your x values. So we have an x value of -4 and -2. Divide that by 2. And we have an x value of 3 and 8. Also divide that by 2. This gets us 1 and 5.5 after you simplify. So if you want the detailed explanation, it's 2 over 2, which is 1, and 11 divided by 2, which is 5.5. All right? Nothing complicated there. Here, you can see the answer there, but the answer is not the important part. Remember, it's the journey to get to the answer. So on a number line, which number is 7/9 away from -6 to 3? So remember, it's always useful to draw out a visual on a number line. Here's 0. Here is 3. Here is -6. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we don't need that one. My bad. So how do I figure this out without a visual? Well, I can just subtract the 2 and take the absolute value of whatever I get. So if I start with -6 and I subtract 3, I take the absolute value of that, because remember, we're finding a distance, not a number. Distances are always positive, and that's why we take the absolute value. So we get -9, absolute value of that is 9. But that's the entire distance. I only want a distance 7/9 of the way through. So I'm going to multiply this by 7/9. So I take 9 and I multiply that by 7 over 9, and I get 7. Looks good so far, but that's not our answer because it is that much away from our starting point, which is -6. So I take -6 and I add 7, and I get 1. So on a number line, this position, 1, would be 7/9 away from -6 to 3. With that all said and done, let's move on to the next thing. Number 5, since all of these are kind of the same, it says given 3 points, x, y, and z, with y as a midpoint, okay, find xz, sorry, y is the midpoint of xz. Find the following. And it says find the coordinates of y. Well, this looks like another midpoint question because, for one, I have a line here, and it's line z, or xz, and y is the midpoint. That means that yz equals xy. Or you could say congruent to since we're in geometry now. So if they're congruent to each other or they're equal to each other, that means I'm just finding the midpoint between the two. So how do I do that? Same way I did the first question. So I'm going to take my x position coordinates and my y position coordinates, and I'm going to just average the two together. So -2 and 6 divided by 2, comma, 6 and -4 divided by 2. When I do that, I get 4 divided by 2, comma, 2 divided by 2. And this becomes 2, comma, 1. So my midpoint for this line would be 2, comma, 1. Not too bad, not too bad. Let's go ahead and look at these things. All right, use the figure below to determine if the statements are true and false. If you need help with this one, this is number 7, by the way. Refer back to the vocabulary video about what coplanar and collinear mean. So it says points A, B, and C are coplanar. So I'm going to just double check where A, B, and C are here. A, B, and C look like they're here, and here, respectively. And it looks like they all share a same plane. Remember, if the points all share the same plane, they are indeed coplanar. So we can say this first one is a giant check mark. Points GHI are collinear. Remember, collinear means if you can draw them all on a straight line, and the line doesn't shift from one line to the next, then they are collinear. Again, refer to my vocabulary video if you need help remembering that. So, GH and I. It looks like GH are collinear, but I is on a different line than G and H. So I cannot say all of those points are collinear, so we can say absolutely no. So next is I, A, and G. So we've got I, we've got A, and we have G. It looks like A and G are on the same line, but I, again, is not on the same line as A and G. Remember, you can only say they're coplanar. Okay. See, you have to be careful. Coplanar, collinear, they sound kind of similar. Anyway, all on the same plane. It looks like I and G are on the same plane, so they would be considered coplanar, but A is not on the same plane as I, so we can't consider all of those points coplanar. So we could say that's a big no. Next one, F, J, and E are collinear. So we're going to look at F, J, and E. They look like they can all be drawn on the same line without shifting that line any sort of way. So we can say, yes, these are collinear. They're all with each other on the same line. So we're good there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next page. So this is number 9 at minute 9. How like appropriate, I guess. It says find the coordinate points of K if K is the midpoint of the segment DH, with D being -2, 9 and H being -10, 5. Well, sometimes these are tricky, so I would always suggest drawing it out. So segment DH and K is a midpoint. So you have some kind of segment here, DH, and K is being in the midpoint. Well, we've talked about this. So the distance of DK, Donkey Kong, should be congruent to the distance of KH because that's what it means to be a midpoint. It's right in the middle between the two. Right? So if that's true, all we need to do is take the average of the 2 points and use our midpoint formula. Once again, we might be seeing a trend here. So, gonna go ahead and do that. So my point for D is -2, 9. And my point for H is -10, 5. I'm going to use my midpoint formula and add up the two x values. So -2 plus -10 divided by 2, take the average, and then do the same thing for my y values. And my pen has decided to nope out on me. It's what it, 1 second. Maybe it's the desk, I don't know. And then divide that by 2. And I break the table, okay. Technical difficulties, it's fine. So -2 plus -10 is -12 over 2. And 9 and 5 make 14 over 2. And so my midpoint is going to be -6 and 7. All right. Number 11, the distance of GH for G being 2, 6 and H being 3, 3. Round your answer to the nearest thousandth. Well, if we want distance, but we have 2 lines and it's not a number line, we're going to have to use the distance formula. Remember, the distance formula is the same as the Pythagorean theorem. If you need more help on that, please view my video on the distance formula. So, if I remember the distance formula correctly, first I need to find the distance between the 2 points and square them together because they're like sides of a triangle. So if we have a line here and here, I can find this distance by using the Pythagorean theorem because it's true that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But equating that to a line, well, this is just the distance between these 2 points, the height distance, and the length distance is going to be your b of the triangle. So we're going to do that. So I have, for my x values, 2 and 3. What am I doing? Okay. So let me just write out the points. So my x value distance, oh, maybe I should write out the distance formula. I'll cut that out. Maybe I won't, I don't know. Is x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. But then you need to take the square root of that to find the total distance. Or I guess we can call this distance for D. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in those numbers. And we're going to say, okay, x2 is going to be 3 minus 2. Square that. And y2 is going to be 3. y1 is 6. Quantity squared. Now, in this case, it doesn't matter which number you start with. You could do it the other way around. You could start with 3 and minus 2. The fact that you're squaring the number at the end means it's going to be the same number in the end anyway. So we're going to simplify some. We're going to say, okay, 3 minus 2 is 1. square that. 3 minus 6 is -3, square that. And we're going to simplify even more by squaring these out. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3, -3 times -3 is 9. And you have the square root of 10. So we can say the distance is the square root of 10. Now, for an exact answer, I would recommend you put this in your calculator and you calculate it to the thousandths place. Let's move on. So this is number 13. Find the coordinates of the missing endpoint if P is the endpoint. Sorry. Find the coordinates of the missing endpoint if P is the midpoint of NQ. Again, this one is a little bit of a twist because it's giving you the midpoint this time instead. So NQ is a line and we know that P is in the middle and our endpoint, or our point that is N, is 2, 0. Our point that is P is 5, 2, and our P is a mystery. Well, you can treat these like two separate number lines and find the distance between N and P, and then just extend that onto Q. So if I think, okay, how far is it from 2 to 5? Well, let's subtract and find out. So 5 minus 2 equals 3. So it's a distance of 3. How far is it from 0 to 2? Subtract that out. 0 minus 2 equals -2. Well, remember, distance is always positive, so always take the positive value of that. So we have an x distance. So I'm going to say this is x distance, so x sub d, and this is going to be your y sub d. Okay, so all you need to do to find out the q position is just apply that same distance to our p value. So I start at 5, and I add 3 to the x value, and I get 8. I start at 2, and I add 2 to that value, because that's our y distance, and I get 4. So this q value must be 8, 4. So nothing too hard about it. You just have to think about it geometrically and figure out, oh, if that's the midpoint, that means I need to travel that far to reach the endpoint. So kind of like on a number line, if I say, okay, I go from 0 to 5, but over here, you have to travel 5 distance to reach the other end, you're going to reach 10. Same idea, except this time it's 2 directions. So it's not too bad. Let's go to number 13. Oh, wait, we already did number 13. 15, I mean. So list terms that are considered undefined in geometry. We'll talk about that in class. I'm not going to go through that right now. So we'll talk about that in class and how to handle that. Let's just move on. Where's my last page? Here it is. Found it. All right. Points x, y, and z are collinear. Remember, collinear means on the same line. With point y between x and z. All right. So, and then it gives you a bunch of different things for that. So, yx, yz. So this is something, again, I recommend you label. So points x, y, z are collinear with point y between x and z. So we have this situation, x, y, z. And what we do know, because this is a midpoint, is that xy is congruent to yz. That'll be very important in just a second, okay? Next thing it tells us is xy is 2x. So xy equals 2x. So I'm going to go ahead and label it up here as well, 2x. Perfect. It tells us that yz is x plus 2. All right. And it also tells us that the whole entire thing, xz, is 5x minus 10. Oh, okay. Quick mistake, guys. This is not true in this problem. Because it just says that point y is between points x and z. It does not specify it as a midpoint. So I am sorry, that is my mistake, but we're correcting it now. So we know that this distance is 2x, and this is x plus 2. However, the entire distance from x to z is 5x minus 10. So how can we figure this out? Well, we have the two pieces. If we add them together, it should equal the whole distance. So we could set up an equation out of this. So we can say 2x plus x plus 2 equals 5x minus 10. And now that we have an equation, it should look something similar to what you did in Algebra 1. Equations on both sides. So first, we're going to combine like terms together. So 2 plus 1, remember, add your coefficients, is 3x. All right. And then get all the terms to one side. So I'm going to get my 10. Okay. I'm going to get my 10 to the other side. So I'm going to add 10 to each side to get the 10 away from one of my x's. And I'm going to get 3x plus 12 equals 5x. Then I'm going to subtract 3x to make sure the x's end up on one side. And I'm going to get 12 equals 2x. So x must be 6 in this case. Because remember, 6 times 2 is 12. So I can figure out the distance of each of these lengths. So I can say that this distance is 12, this distance is 8, and the whole distance altogether is 20. Now